Let's take a trip back to America in the 1960s, a decade of deep change, bold voices, and shifting traditions. It was a time when the familiar rhythms of family life started to evolve, and the cultural landscape grew more vibrant than ever. In the early years of the decade, American life still closely resembled the 1950s. The traditional family was the foundation. Most people married young, often in their early 20s, and children quickly followed. The typical household featured a working father, a stay-at-home mother, and a backyard full of kids. But things didn't stay the same for long. As the cost of living crept up, from groceries to gas to homes, many women stepped beyond the home, either entering the workforce or returning to college. And often it wasn't just about finances. A growing number of women were questioning the old expectations and seeking lives outside the domestic sphere. By the end of the decade, divorce rates had climbed from 23% to 35%, a sign of changing social values. Financially, the average yearly income rose from about $5,300 in 1960 to more than $8,500 by 1969. But not all paychecks were created equal. Men were often paid more than women for doing the same job. Minimum wage increased from $1 an hour in 1960 to $1.16 by the end of the decade. Everyday costs also changed. A new home in 1960 was around $12,700. By 1969, it was $15,500. A new car, about $2,600 at the start of the decade, and $3,270 by the end. Gasoline rose from 25 cents a gallon to 35 cents. Bread was about 20 cents, eggs 50 cents a dozen, and milk hovered near $1 per gallon. But life wasn't just about working and spending. Leisure time, especially time spent together as a family, was still important, and no form of entertainment shaped American life more than the television. TV was the heart of the home in the 60s. Westerns ruled the airwaves. Gunsmoke, Bonanza, Rawhide, and Wagon Train kept viewers glued to their screens. Families laughed along with The Andy Griffith Show, My Three Sons, The Dick Van Dyke Show, and The Beverly Hillbillies. Young viewers had their own favorites. Star Trek, Batman, Mission Impossible, and Lost in Space all captured the imagination of a new generation. Many of these shows remain cultural icons to this day. Movies were just as influential. The Sound of Music, starring Julie Andrews, was the biggest box office success of the decade. Andrews also enchanted audiences in Mary Poppins, while Audrey Hepburn lit up the screen in My Fair Lady and Breakfast at Tiffany's. John Wayne remained a symbol of American grit, while Clint Eastwood rose to fame in spaghetti westerns like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And of course, the world met James Bond through Sean Connery in Dr. No, Goldfinger, and Thunderball. Films like Psycho, Dr. Strangelove, The Graduate, and Lawrence of Arabia became part of cinema history. Meanwhile, Disney brought magic into homes with 101 Dalmatians, The Jungle Book, and The Sword in the Stone. And when it came to sports, America's love for baseball burned brighter than ever. In 1961, the nation watched in awe as Roger Maris broke Babe Ruth's legendary home run record. Icons like Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Frank Robinson, and Bob Gibson thrilled fans throughout the decade. In basketball, the Boston Celtics, led by coach Red Auerbach and superstar Bill Russell, dominated the NBA with 9 championships. Wilt Chamberlain was a force of nature, scoring titles like rebound records and 4 MVPs. College basketball had its own legend in UCLA's coach John Wooden, who led his team to 5 national titles in the decade. And in the boxing ring, Muhammad Ali was more than a champion. He became the voice of a generation. His talent, charisma, and outspokenness made him one of the most unforgettable figures of the 1960s. Of course, we can't talk about the 60s without talking about the music. The British invasion swept in, with the Beatles leading the charge. Debuting in 1963, they went on to score 19 #1 hits and become a cultural phenomenon. But the sound of the 60s was diverse. Bob Dylan's poetic lyrics, Janis Joplin's raw emotion, the Beach Boys' harmonies, The Doors, Hendrix, The Who, all unique, all unforgettable. Motown also soared, with the Supremes, Marvin Gaye, and the Temptations, creating a sound that was smooth, soulful, and distinctly American. And then came Woodstock. In August 1969, more than 400,000 people gathered in upstate New York for 3 days of peace, music, and muddy memories. It was the defining cultural moment of a generation. Fashion also shifted in bold new directions. For the first time, teenagers dressed very differently from their parents. Women began wearing pants more often than skirts. Hemlines rose with the advent of the miniskirt, and by the late 60s, bell-bottom jeans, tie-dye shirts, and paisley prints were everywhere. Men grew their hair longer, women cut theirs shorter. It was rebellion, expression, and style all in one. The 1960s was a time of change, but through all the transformation, American families found new ways to live, connect, and express themselves. Every household had its own story, every person their own memory. And maybe you remember it too. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your own 60s memories. We'd love to hear your story. This is Memory Lane Media, where the past comes alive, one story at a time.